Hello everyone and welcome. Yes, my name is Arafire and I'm back from my week off to give you another episode of My Top 5. And I know what you're thinking, didn't we just have an episode of My Top 5? Well, I'm treating you, you lucky people. I want to give a quick shout out to Borders Dude first of all, who did a great video on his channel. I'll put a link above my head there. And he did a great video showing all the people's collections and talking through some people's collecting hobbies and how they're laid out in their respective rooms. It was really nice to see a bit of praise going into one of these videos. So as it's World Comic Book Day this week, at least according to some sites, I wanted to do a My Top 5 that I have wanted to do since I started this channel. I wanted to do a My Top 5 IDW Moments. Now, the IDW comics is quite mainstay in Transformers history now. There's been some brilliant moments. Some of the best moments that I've enjoyed in all the Transformers have been from these comics. I will say quickly where this stems from. This is where IDW have picked up the licensing rights to do Transformers comics and artwork from Dreamwave at the time of All Hail Megatron to really to date. But what I'm going to focus on now is the first era, not the first phase, that's something else, but the first era, which really will be from All Hail Megatron to the end of the Lost Light. And let's have a look at my top 5 entries. Number 5, Megatron and Optimus share their history. Now this is a brilliant exchange and a brilliant dialogue that goes on for pages and pages. So Megatron, in his new body, willingly gets himself captured by the Autobots and interrogated by Optimus Prime. And this leads to a very deep, almost friendly conversation, which ultimately some of the Autobots, particularly Hot Rod, call Optimus out on. And you see how deep this history has gone. And of course we know a lot of this history, but they're sitting there replaying their battles in their mind. And you even see a tie-in to a previous battle within Dreamwave's publishing before, and the ferocious battles and near-death experiences that both would suffer at the hands of each other. And by the time they sit there and have this real heart-to-heart, you almost see a friendship, this admiration throughout millenniums of war and destruction and chaos. It's been culminating to this one discussion. There's actually a really good voiceover video on it on YouTube where you have the passages read out in typical Megatron and Optimus sounding voices, and it does make it flow quite well. I think this is such insight into both characters and how when they both get to this kind of you nearly killed me, I nearly killed you, and this kind of meeting in the middle, they just sit there and just laugh to each other, and how many battles they've encountered, how they keep doing the same dance. It really makes for a very poignant moment between two leaders. Number 4, Rodimus saves Getaway. Now, Getaway for me in IDW on the Lost Light wasn't particularly my favourite villain. It took me a little while to warm up to him as a serious threat, as a credible threat, but he became very sly, very scheming and very sinister in his way that really it helped you hate him towards the end. But when it came to a final showdown, if you like, between a different coloured Hot Rod, or Rodimus, and Getaway, there was this interesting moment of Getaway making a break for it and running away into fire, basically, or being trapped in the fire. This was after a battle between Rodimus and Getaway. Rodimus could have walked away. He was the victor. He would have been the one emerging victorious. But he walks into the fire and comes out carrying Getaway in his hand with his new purple and black decor burnt away, emerging in the red and yellow Hot Rod colours that we know and mostly love. This was a very, very interesting moment, and it was almost a coming of age of the Hot Rod character, Rodimus character. He was quite childish throughout the Lost Light series, very much a part of his charm, but this was very much the I will do the right thing. This doesn't feel right to leave someone behind and suffer. And it was a very good ending to that particular story arc, but just that image alone of seeing Getaway being carried out by his adversary was just a wonderful story. Number 3. Starscream in his pure form. Now, this goes on to a series that I have been touting for quite some time, the To All Are One series, where it is a mini-series and a very much a political series on Cybertron, with Cybertron being ruled by Starscream, constantly challenged by Windblade, and then you've got the Combaticons merging into a mostly angry and sometimes dead Bruticus smashing up Cybertron. It's a great story, but right at the end of it, as you see sometimes, but not all the time, you see Starscream doing the right thing. It's not something we always see, but when we do see it, it is quite nice and welcome. And you find out that Starscream is effectively constructed cold and wasn't able to choose his body and be who he was born to be, effectively. And you see this glimpse of what Starscream would have looked like, and you see this blue Starscream, which is a very interesting design and an interesting take, and he's quite noble and elegant. I guess you could say almost elements of shattered glass involved. But that is only part of this story. At the end of the entire story arc for that series, you see Starscream confessing to his lies and crimes, and how he manipulated the inhabitants of Cybertron, as he always will, but his conscience finally wins over him with a bit of nagging from Windblade along the way. But this was a very good culmination of what Starscream could have been, and his redemption, his atonement, to showing how he had to be honest and open to his Cybertronian colleagues and friends. It made for a brilliant end to a very, very enjoyable long-running story. Number 2, Megatron's return after Chaos. Now, how I didn't choose this as my number 1 pick, I don't know. And I should know, it's my list. This was a moment that I was utterly grabbed and sought with this particular image. So Megatron is in his Tyrant form and is in his new form in the Chaos series, which was very much, I guess you could say, the end of Phase 1, if you want to go into phases as an IDW. And he helps the Autobots fighting this creature of chaos that's brought to life by Galvatron, and he holds his own against it, but he is completely overrun by these corrupt sweeps, and you don't see him. When it finished, when Optimus opens the Matrix, kind of Cybertron is reborn, it's a hard reset, and there's no Megatron. No one has seen him. And I remember reading the comics for ages and ages, and you had Starscream trying to lead up through Cybertron, and Bumblebee was trying to lead. Optimus goes into exile, and life goes on. And I would think it was about 2 to 3 months, and then eventually there is this one passage, and it was such a great passage where you look at it, and you have Starscream almost talking to himself, saying he had it all, everything he ever wanted. And he stops and says no, as he looks and sees this figure in the distance. And he said, and it all changed. And you see this broken down Megatron in what's left of his new body, walking along, these 2 piercing red eyes, carrying a decapitated Sweep's head in his hand. And the final passage is Starscream thinking to himself, it all changed when Megatron came back, and everything turned to dust. And for me, watching that at the time, reading that at the time I should say, I was looking at it thinking, he's been gone for months with no explanation about where one of the main characters is. And Starscream, as always, looks like he's going to have it all. And this broken, battered, destroyed Megatron is walking through as the last bot standing. It was a great return, and one that I just honestly go back and read, because I just remember being utterly awestruck by seeing a broken Megatron's return. And number 1, I Love You. Yes, I think this could be for a few people, and yes, I think you know what I mean, but this is the time that IDW, the writing really went for the feels, and it hurt. It did hurt, but it was a lovely, wonderful moment. So in this, for the first time, we saw a same-sex, gender, homosexual couple for the first time between Chrome Dome and Rewind. And it was fairly teased throughout that they were becoming a couple, but it wasn't played on too much. And then there was a brutal, horrible attack with Overlord on board the Lost Light, utterly destroying the inhabitants of the ship, and it ultimately culminates with Rewind sacrificing himself in a stasis pod, takes Overlord off the ship, and means that Chrome Dome fires a rocket to blow up Overlord. It's the only way to take him out. He's far too strong, but in doing so kills his partner. And you see for the issues afterwards how Chrome Dome is struggling with his grief, and it hurts him so much, and you find out that he's been in this situation before with his other partners, and how the pain was so unbearable he would inject himself with a memory wipe with some needles, and he was happy to erase all of their memories and any involvement he had with them to remove the pain. And Brainstorm tries to talk him out of it and saying, don't forget, these people of your past, they've meant a lot to you, but Chrome Dome is struggling. But Rewind, of course, being effectively a camcorder, records all of this and leaves Chrome Dome a message before he goes. And the final passage is just a collection of fragments of discussions and memories. And there's just one final bit where Rewind says to Chrome Dome, "I don't say it often enough." And at the bottom it says, "I love you." And that's where the screen goes blank, the recording stops, and you see Chrome Dome just staring in a reflection into a blank screen, and you see his needles are still out, and he just retracts them and he walks away. And that's when you realise that he is happy to live with the sorrow. He's content. He knows it means more to suffer with it. And that was probably the first time that I thought, this is a Transformers comic. There's no war, there's no guns, there's not even any transformation. But the story was brilliant. It didn't even look at it being a same-sex couple as that being the main selling point. It was just great storytelling with a tragedy in the ending. But it was so done and carefully thought out, done to a point. It was so enjoyable to watch, albeit sad. And it culminated, okay, ultimately into a nice ending further down the line. But for that being the final passage, it resonates with a very, very touching moment. And there you go, that is my top 5 IDW moments from the first era at least. What do you think? Have I missed yours out? Do leave a note in the comments below. I'd love to know what your favourite moments are as well. But thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you on the next one.